So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? I absolutely would, although I'm not sure it would be at the very top of my list of romance books I'd recommend. I think for anyone looking for something easy to read and a little bit cheesy billionaire romance, then I absolutely would. Hi everyone, my name is Terry Westwell and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our Panic at the Book Club book of the week, which is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send a direct message. Rowan is in the business of creating fairy tales, theme parks, production companies, and 5-star hotels, and everything could be his if he renovates Dreamland. The initial idea of hiring Zara was good in theory until he kissed her, and then things just sort of spiraled out of control once Rowan texted her using an alias. But by the time he realised where he went wrong, it was too late. People like him don't get the happy ending. Not when they're destined to ruin them. After Zara submitted a drunk proposal criticising Dreamland's most expensive ride, she probably should have been fired. Instead, Rowan offered her her dream job. The catch? She has to work for the most difficult boss she's ever met. Rowan was rude and completely off limits, but her heart didn't care. That is, until she discovered his secret. It was time to teach the billionaire that money couldn't fix everything. My eyebrows be sisters and not twins. Oh well. First, this is a spoiler-free part where we'll discuss any spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. As usual, let's start with those chapter lengths. Most of them were incredibly reasonable, being around that 10-page mark that we all know I love so much. However, what I will say is that being over 400 pages, it was definitely a little on the lengthier side for me when it comes to romance novels. Personally, for me, I think that a simple romance novel should be around, 300-ish pages, unless there is a lot going on. Obviously, it depends on subgenre, but I think for most traditionally published romance novels, they do tend to typically be around the 300 to 400 pages. And while I did really enjoy the book, I'm not entirely sure what happened in it to get it to that higher end of the scale. I mean, I guess there was a big focus on the business/theme park side of things, as well as the two main characters' growing relationship, as well as the fact that it was a dual POV, even though time didn't often overlap. Even if you were switching the character's perspective, it would still typically follow on from what had just happened in the previous chapter, or it might even skip a bunch of time because it was set over a period of 6 months. I do really like single perspectives, however, when it comes to romance, I do also really enjoy a dual POV, and I think that this one was done really well. I think the perspectives were fairly 50-50, if not a little bit heavier towards Rowan's side, but both perspectives were just as important as the other and played key parts within the story. It was incredibly easy to read, easy to follow, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. However, obviously when it comes to that billionaire trope, I think it opens up for that unrealistic cheesiness. Probably just because there tends to be more extravagant behaviour and actions, and this billionaire character is actually able to make these ridiculous grand gestures. I do think that that was the case with this book. I think it was certainly all of those things, but I loved the two main characters as they navigated this new relationship and learnt how to trust one another. The story was sweet, easy to read, a little predictable at times, and if I was honest with myself, I think a lot more gripping than I anticipated. I think I read this one in around 3 days, mostly reading it in the evenings, and when I did, I was really hooked. I feel like I had a really hard time rating this book because a small part of me is telling me that I shouldn't have enjoyed it anywhere near as much as I did, but I really did enjoy it, and it just had no right to be as enjoyable as it was. If I had to compare this to any other book, it would probably be something between Anna Huang's King of Wrath and Twisted series, or maybe even something like Hannah Grace's Icebreaker, because although it does read a little bit naive, it really isn't suitable for a younger audience. Now we've reached that part of the video where I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first, because beyond this point there'll definitely be spoilers. Okay, so small pet peeve, like just one of those things that once you notice it, you can't not, but repeat phrases and actions, when I do spot them, they do bug me. Like many of the books that we've read on here, it doesn't tend to bother me that much. I've definitely moved past, Sarah J. Maas giving all of her characters watery bowels whenever they get scared or nervous, and I feel like if I can get past that, I can get past any of them. And Lauren Asher, on the other hand, despite one of her characters putting Grumpy in the grumpy sunshine trope, he was constantly throwing his head back and laughing, constantly. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that it was also partially because it was just Zara noticing when it did happen, because, he's grumpy and it doesn't happen very often, but it seems to happen more around her. But at the same time, it just felt like too much. And not to mention, we also had Zara, who was the sunshine part of the story, who was also constantly throwing her head back and laughing. While yes, the book was actually really funny, I feel like the characters had some amazing back and forth banter, it wasn't that funny. It just felt like a little bit too much. But I'm mature and I can move past it and maybe just believe that these two characters are just maniacs who like to laugh a lot. A lot. Now, the book was a little predictable, if not even a little repetitive. I mean, Rowan would fuck up because, as you saw from his point of view, he wasn't telling her the whole truth. Although you could kind of understand why, because he only knew Zara for all of 5 minutes. But alas, after messing up the first time, he clearly still didn't tell her the whole truth. So she accepted him back only for him to mess up again, and for that to lead to this misunderstanding. I feel like it was a very, very minor misunderstanding because he'd already messed up in lying to her about who it was she was already texting, and I feel like this little misunderstanding wouldn't have really changed all that much. I mean, all it really did was prevent her from forgiving him too quickly, because there is a possibility that he only got to know her because of the vote. So while there was a misunderstanding trope, which I usually hate, I don't feel like it was necessary, and I don't think it would have made a damn difference to the overall narrative if it wasn't written in, so I was actually fine with it. Now, are you ready for this? Because I'm only going to say this once, but despite my absolute hatred for a pregnancy trope, even in an epilogue, I think that this one did it quite well. I am not a fan of the trope. I don't think that a woman's happiness is through her womb or through marriage. I think that you can have a happily ever after without it. It's 2024, and I think that actually it isn't the idea of a lot of people's happy ending. This book did actually do it quite well. It was sweet, and it did also feel like it was done for other reasons other than just, well, that's because that's what women do. I think it was more to do with Rowan and his new sense of family and life and becoming someone that his own dad wasn't, even though in the beginning I think that they had a lot more in common than he probably would want to admit. So, just this once, I will admit that the trope may have added to the story where, in my opinion, it may otherwise take away. I had no right to enjoy this book nearly as much as I did. Rowan went from being an ass to being someone who would whisk Zara away on these adventures and organise book signing events with her favourite author and obsessively texting her as someone else. All while claiming he didn't really want anything with her. It was naive in its writing, it was a cheesy concept with cringy behaviour, but I'd be damned if I didn't say that I enjoyed it. So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? I absolutely would, although I'm not sure it would be at the very top of my list of romance books I'd recommend. I think for anyone looking for something easy to read and a little bit cheesy billionaire romance, then I absolutely would. I think my hesitancy is just that the billionaire trope isn't exactly my favourite, and when the world is then set with theme parks and princesses, it doesn't exactly help with the cheesy, unrealistic thing. That being said, I did really enjoy it a lot more than I thought I was going to. So, will I be reading any more by Lauren Asher? I think I will, but I don't think I'll be in a rush to read it immediately. I think I'll probably pick up the next book in the series and just read it when the mood strikes, when I want to read an easy romance and just shut my brain off for a little while. Jess over on TikTok says she loves a grumpy sunshine trope, and that's exactly what this book gives. But why don't you let me know what you thought? Did you enjoy the book? Anne said that he really liked Rowan and Zara and how easy it was to connect to the two characters because we got their background, and as the dual POV made it really easy to understand how they would perceive things and why they might do things a certain way. Anne liked the way that Zara helped to open Rowan's eyes to the fact that there's more to life than just work, because at the beginning of the book, that's all his life revolved around. It was like it mattered more than him, so it was nice that Zara could show him that he does matter and he is important and helped him to be more vulnerable around her. Anne said that it was kind of like she was reminding him that he was in fact a human and not a work robot, although he does like Rowan's no-nonsense attitude. The chapter lengths were good, none of them seeming too long. He's actually read some of Lauren Asher's books before, and she's one of his 2 favourite authors of all time. He loves the way that she writes, it's just so easy to read, and he finds that when he is reading one of her books, he can happily sit there for an hour and not even realise or get bored. He'd definitely recommend this book to anyone who likes romance, especially if they like the billionaire trope. So I think it's safe to say that Anne will also be reading more from Lauren Asher in the future. Next week we'll be discussing Songlight by Moira Buffini, so don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday the 18th of November at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram or Discord. The following week will be The Perfect Son by Freida Mcfadden, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye!